Moses remains one of the most unforgettable figures in human history, not just for his mighty works, but for the deep humility that marked his leadership. For 40 years, he led a restless nation through the wilderness. Moses never made a single major decision without first seeking the Lord's guidance. That was the secret of his lasting success. Maranatha Study TV presents Lesson 2 of the first quarter, titled Surprised by Grace, with Pastor N.C. Bright. The key text is taken from the book of Hebrew, chapter 11, verse 31. It reads, "By faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace." Sunday, second chance. The first time Israel came close to entering the promised land, God told Moses to send spies to explore Canaan. 12 spies went, and while 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, brought back a positive report full of faith, the other 10 focused on the giants and the strong cities they saw. Their doubt spread among the people, and Israel lost courage instead of trusting God. This was their first chance to enter the land, and they blew it because of unbelief. Just before crossing into the promised land again, Israel failed once more. This time they joined themselves with Moabite women and turned to idolatry by worshipping false gods. However, the good news is that God is a God of second chance. Though Israel failed before, he still led them back to the border of Canaan and gave them another opportunity to trust him. Joshua remembered the mistakes of the first spies. He knew that fear and unbelief had destroyed the people's faith. He sent only 2 spies instead of 12, and he sent them secretly. Joshua wanted to ensure that this second chance would not be wasted. Every good leader needs wisdom to succeed, and Joshua demonstrated this wisdom by learning from past failures. The lesson for us is simple. When God gives us a second chance, we must never take his grace for granted. Monday, value in unexpected places. Rahab was a Canaanite woman living in Jericho who worked as a harlot. When the 2 spies Joshua sent entered the city, they came to her house and she welcomed them. Soon after, the king of Jericho heard that spies were in her home and sent soldiers to capture them. However, Rahab hid the spies and told the soldiers they had already left. Her decision was not just an act of kindness, it was an act of faith and courage. Rahab heard how the God of the Israelites dried up the Red Sea and defeated mighty kings for Israel. She knew that Jericho was doomed under his judgment. By hiding the spies, Rahab was switching sides, leaving her sinful city and choosing to stand with God's people. She openly confessed in Joshua chapter 2 verse 11, "The Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath." When Jericho was destroyed, Rahab and her family were spared. Her story proves that Jericho's people perished not because they could not be saved, but because they refused to surrender. The New Testament writers commend Rahab not for lying, but for the faith and action behind her choice. She lied because she came from a society where lying and deceit were normal for survival. Therefore, when faced with a dangerous situation, she acted according to what she knew best at that time, and God looked beyond her imperfect actions and saw her sincere heart. After joining Israel, Rahab learned more about truth and righteousness, and becoming a part of God's chosen people, and even appearing in the family line of Jesus. Tuesday, new allegiance. After Rahab hid the 2 spies, she begged them to spare her and her family. She said in Joshua chapter 2, verses 12 and 13, "I have shown you kindness, now show kindness to me and my father's house." In simple terms, Rahab was saying, I saved your lives, please save mine. Her reasoning was fair and clear. Life for life, kindness for kindness. Rahab was unknowingly asking to be treated as part of God's covenant family. Her faith in Israel's God placed her under the same mercy and protection that God has shown to his people. The spies agreed with her request, but gave her clear instructions. Their conditions were similar to what God told Israel during the first Passover in Egypt. Rahab was told to tie a red cord in her window. This red cord became a sign of safety, just like the blood on Israel's doorposts during the Passover. She and her family were also told to stay inside the house. By obeying these instructions, Rahab proves that her faith is real, and she acted on that belief. Rahab's story shows that God's mercy and covenant love are not limited to a single nation. His grace is open to anyone, regardless of their background or past. No one is too far from God's reach. His saving grace is available to all who choose to trust and obey. Wednesday, conflicting values. Throughout Moses' leadership, one key principle made him successful. He never made any major decision without first asking for God's guidance. Joshua, who served as Moses' assistant, learned this same principle and often followed it. However, in Joshua chapter 9, we see a time when Joshua failed to do so. For the first time, he made a major decision, entering a covenant with the Gibeonites without asking for God's will. This mistake had serious consequences and caused Israel to break God's clear command. After Israel's victory in Jericho and Ai, the kings of Canaan united to fight against them. However, the Gibeonites decided to do something different. Realizing that they could not defeat Israel, they chose peace over war. To achieve this, they pretended to come from a distant country. They wore old clothes, carried moldy bread to make their stories believable. Their goal was to secure a peace treaty with Israel because God's law allowed peace only with nations outside Canaan, which we can find in Deuteronomy chapter 20 verses 10 through 18. Although their method was deceitful, their motive was survival. They had heard of the great things God of Israel had done, just as Rahab had. Both Rahab and the Gibeonites recognized that Israel's God was the true God, and that safety could only be found under his protection. Sadly, Joshua and the leaders of Israel were deceived because they did not ask for counsel from the Lord. Even though the Gibeonites obtained the covenant through deceit, Israel made an oath in God's name and was bound to retain it. This story reminds us that every Christian leader must follow Moses' example, always seeking God's guidance before making decisions. It also shows that God's mercy can reach anyone who truly desires to be under his protection, even if their beginning is imperfect. Thursday, surprising grace. In ancient Israel, an oath made before God was sacred and could not be broken, even if it caused trouble or was mistakenly made. Breaking such an oath would dishonor God's name. Therefore, even though the Gibeonites had tricked them, Israel kept their promises and allowed them to live. Joshua's decision showed both justice and grace. Justice demanded that the oath be respected, but grace led Joshua to give the Gibeonites a place among God's people instead of destroying them. They were made wood cutters and water carriers for God's house, serving from generation to generation. What seemed to be a curse later became a blessing. Walking in the temple brought the Gibeonites close to God's presence and his people. Over time, they became part of Israel's worship community and never separated from them again. If the Gibeonites had told the truth from the start and asked for mercy, probably God might have still spared them just as he did for Rahab. Because God has made it clear in Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 23, that he did not desire to destroy sinners. It reads, "Do I have any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, says the Lord, and not that he should turn from his ways and live." Friday further thought. The children of Israel were to occupy all the territory which God appointed them. Those nations that rejected the worship and service of the true God were to be disposed. But it was God's purpose that by the revelation of his character through Israel, men should be drawn unto him. To all the world, the gospel invitation was to be given. All who, like Rahab the Canaanite and Ruth the Moabite, turned from idolatry to the worship of the true God, were to unite themselves with his chosen people. Christ's Object Lessons, page 290. If you want this gospel message to reach more people, please hit the subscribe button. Like and share this video. Doing so will help YouTube recommend it to more viewers. The comment section is open for your reactions. Thank you for studying this lesson with us. Goodbye and remain blessed. Until we meet again next week. Maranatha.